Chapter 1. How Codependency Works. A codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her, and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. Melody Beattie. The dynamics and psychology of a codependent relationship. Psychologists were the first group of people to stick a label on the trait that Melody Beattie, 1992, describes in the quote above. But there's no universal definition for codependency. Different psychologists, authors, and researchers have divergent perspectives on the concept. However, there are a few common traits of codependency that are shared across all definitions. Jessica, in the story I shared in the introduction to this audiobook, was a codependent person who was affected by the lifestyle of her alcoholic husband. But codependency doesn't always have alcohol in the mix. Let's read about another couple's story. Ian and Alicia happened to meet and started chatting at the mall and instantly felt a spark. They found out that both of them had just gotten out of toxic relationships, so they could empathize with each other. They decided to start off as friends, but eventually they inevitably slid into romance. After confessing their feelings for each other, they decided to start a fresh relationship together. Sounds good, right? You'd think that since they were experienced with toxic relationship dynamics, they'd be smart enough to avoid the pitfalls from their previous relationships. But sadly, it didn't work out that way. They enjoyed the first year of their relationship. Then the baggage from their past began to surface. Alicia had a spending issue. Despite her stable, well-paying job, she was often in debt. She tried to conceal the incessant calls from loan companies from Ian. And when they moved in together, she hid the fact that she still owed her old roommate on utility bills. Let's not forget about Ian here, who in this case became the one going the extra mile to care for his partner while bearing the brunt of the stress alone. When he found out about Alicia's debts, he took it upon himself to pay them off and fix her life. Almost as soon as he embarked on that mission, he started feeling the repercussions on his own finances. He had to delay paying his credit card bills. He couldn't meet his own financial needs because he was scared of declining Alicia's requests for money or assistance with her debts. Ian had a long list of things that bothered him about his girlfriend, but he never seemed to get the chance to sit down with her and talk about them. Alicia became skillful at guilt-tripping him, withholding her love and affection anytime he didn't do exactly what she wanted him to do. Ian was silently suffering. He wasn't comfortable enough with anyone else in his life to unburden himself to them. He secretly wished that Alicia would get a better-paying job to sort out her debts. But that remained only a wish. As though trouble in paradise wasn't enough, Ian was also having trouble at work. He couldn't say no to requests. He routinely worked overtime, and a lot of those hours were spent covering for the professional shortcomings of his colleagues. He worked during Christmas break because his boss demanded that he put in extra hours on an upcoming company project. Despite knowing he needed time off to recharge, Ian kept going. The demands on his time increased, both by his job and by Alicia. He continually felt pulled in two directions, feeling increasingly angry and clueless about how to sort out his life. As you can see, neither Alicia nor Ian's work colleagues were drug addicts or alcoholics. Yet, Ian is still demonstrating codependent behavior. His life ended up at the same climax of every codependent tale: bitterness and anger, where the rottenness beneath the once beautiful soul begins to emerge, and the codependent becomes resentful and enraged by everything that happens to them. Their capacity to love and be good to others while neglecting themselves becomes overstretched, and their only response is an ugly outburst. So now that we've seen two examples, what does codependency mean? Codependence isn't exactly a word you hear every day. Let's first try to understand where the word comes from. A closer look at the word codependence reveals that it's formed from the combination of the prefix co and the word dependence. Dependence is a common word. As you probably know, if you're dependent on someone or something, it means you can't do without them, right? Co is a prefix that means together or mutual. In other words, codependents are mutually dependent on each other. Is it bad to be mutually dependent? After all, most couples are mutually dependent, aren't they? Even colleagues at work can be mutually dependent on each other to get things done, right? It's true. None of us can really do anything all alone. As we mentioned in the introduction to this part of the audiobook, we are social creatures, and we rely on our relationships with others. However, there is a version of mutual dependence that can become very unhealthy, and that's what codependence is. Now let's take a look at some signs of codependence. Am I codependent? Before we look at the symptoms of codependence, let's dive into another story. Gerald was a handsome man in his 40s. He was a successful businessman, but couldn't transmit that skill into keeping his romantic relationships with women alive. His first marriage of 13 years ended in a messy divorce. He mourned his dead marriage for 2 months, then fell in love again. She was an alcoholic just like his first wife. He spent months trying to help her out of her addiction, but he ended up hurting himself. Instead of getting help for his partner, he became resentful because every attempt proved fruitless. She wouldn't stop drinking. Gerald was devastated and eventually ended the relationship. A hopeless romantic, Gerald fell in love with another woman shortly after. And guess what? She was also an alcoholic. Gerald hadn't given himself time to recover from his past woes. He was in shambles himself, yet he kept throwing himself into new relationships and bearing the burdens of others. Like Jessica, who we talked about in the introduction, Gerald remained willfully blind to his new girlfriend's problems. He defended her. He lied to himself that she wasn't the problem. He was. He tried to enjoy his relationship with her, but it only got uglier. After a while, he felt he needed help, and he went to see a counselor. After a few sessions, the therapist suggested that Gerald's problem was rooted in his family, because his father and older brother were alcoholics, and having to take care of them had affected him deeply. The therapist brought up the idea that he might be codependent, but Gerald rejected the diagnosis and concluded that nothing was wrong with the women he had dated. Attributing the failures to simple bad luck, he hoped his luck would turn and threw himself fully into dating once more. This should not be surprising, as self-denial is a key trait of codependency. Elder 2018. Our focus in reading this story shouldn't be on judging Gerald's situation. Rather, the point is to understand that you don't have to linger in a state of self-denial that leads you into the depths of pain and resentment before you come to the truth. The following signs will help you figure out if you're codependent or not. Circle the appropriate answer after each statement. You're obsessed with taking care of other person's needs. Yes or no? You perceive yourself as completely unselfish and dedicated to the well-being of others. Yes or no? You judge what you think, say, or do as never good enough. Yes or no? You're embarrassed to receive recognition, praise, or gifts. Yes or no? You have a hard time with self-acceptance. Yes or no? You find it difficult to make decisions in a relationship. Yes or no? You keep redefining your personal boundaries to accommodate other people. Yes or no? You find it difficult to express your needs in a relationship. Yes or no? You're quick to say yes to your partner's every wish without considering the effect on you. Yes or no? You always make excuses for your partner's bad behavior. Yes or no? You've lost your sense of identity, interests, and desires. Yes or no? You give more to your partner than you're getting back. Yes or no? You become resentful when your partner declines your help or rejects your advice. Yes or no? You lack trust in yourself and have poor self-esteem. Yes or no? You're afraid of being abandoned. Yes or no? You depend on unhealthy people in relationships to your own detriment. Yes or no? You magnify your sense of responsibility for the actions of others. Yes or no? Your relationships are built on conditional, controlling, and coercive behaviors. Yes or no? You use indirect or evasive language to avoid conflict. Yes or no? You believe that displaying emotion is a sign of weakness. Yes or no? The list above isn't exhaustive. However, with that list, you should be able to establish which side of the codependent coin you're on. But there's still more you need to learn about this pattern. Codependency in families. A family unit is one of the relationship contexts in which codependence can be experienced. Most times, this happens between parents and children. According to Lewis, 2020, one of the ways to identify codependence in a family is when a parent has an unhealthy attachment to their child, going overboard to exercise excessive control over the child's life because of that attachment. Lewis, 2020, explains that, for example, a codependent parent may expect their child to keep them mentally stable and emotionally happy, essentially viewing the child as responsible for their well-being. Furthermore, if this behavior is perpetrated for a long enough time, it will lead to chaos and throw the family into a dark spiral of resentment and dissatisfaction. From another perspective, when a family member struggles with addiction of any kind, it can prevent others within the family from living their own lives happily. It's not difficult to see why. Our natural response is to help our family members however we can, and that's a great intention. But as great as that is, it could also create a codependent relationship that will hurt other members of the family and might eventually hamper the recovery of that loved one from the addictive situation. Being emotionally connected to problems in the lives of other people can make us lose our identity, self-worth, beautiful soul, integrity, happiness, serenity, and individuality. We'll begin to compromise our boundaries and value system just to help the other person. If you find that you constantly feel the need to save someone in your family who has a destructive behavioral pattern, or you feel drawn to someone who is struggling emotionally or physically and constantly put their needs before yours, you're tilting towards codependence. But shouldn't you help with such issues in your family? Quite frankly, no. Does that answer surprise you? This book isn't an advocate of selfishness or cruelty by any means. You have the liberty to help others, but your decisions shouldn't lead to severe behavioral patterns that cause you to unintentionally endorse the addictive or toxic behaviors of your family member, or lead you to go out of your way to meet their physical or emotional needs while you get lost in the midst of that genuine effort. Your beautiful soul might end up turning sour and resentful when everything that you loved about the other person begins to be darkened. Either of your parents could be physically or emotionally attached to you in an unhealthy way, and this could make them develop obsessive behavioral patterns. One final note, this could also be generational. Maybe you were the child of a codependent parent growing up, and now you're a parent and you're witnessing the same obsessive behavioral patterns toward your child and yourself. The things I'll share in this chapter will be helpful to you. The codependent mother. Mothers are amazing caregivers, but sometimes they overdo it, and when they do, it strains their relationship with their children. Carter, 2022, shares some real-life comments from mothers who unintentionally found themselves in the codependence conundrum. This could be you, too. My aha moment came when I paid 3 months of my 21-year-old son's rent and skipped a mortgage payment of my own, because it's easier knowing his housing is secure than to properly and formally put boundaries in place that may require immediate investment and change from him. At Ella_Acha. One of my kids would get angry or frustrated when I asked him to do chores or follow through on things when he was little. I did a lot for him growing up. Summer before he left for college, he told me he was super worried because he didn't know how to do a lot of things for himself, like laundry, cook, make a doctor's appointment. And of course, this was my fault. I was protecting him and myself, and took away the opportunity for him to feel self-sufficient and feel like he can take care of himself. Anonymous. Dr. Asharina Reem, a clinical psychologist, notes that codependency in mothers, or parents generally, creates worry and internal pressure to be others-focused, as cited by Carter, 2022. Mothers should be a part of their child's growth up to a certain stage of life. They're often so connected to their child that they know what the child is feeling or thinking. This is a great quality for a mom to have. And if you're reading this and you're a mother, you might notice this trait in yourself. But where the strain starts is when your child grows older, and yet you still feel you have the same role as you did when your child was just a toddler. Once your child matures and becomes a teenager or young adult, you cannot continue to make certain decisions for them. You must realize at some point that you're not meant to tell them what to do all their lives. They'll rebel one day. Nobody likes to be controlled or to have decisions made for them. As a mother, when you begin to overdo what you perceive to be your God-given responsibility to your children, you may also begin to lose your relationship with your partner. You'll be so focused on tending to the needs of your child or children that you cease to see your partner. Your romantic relationship begins to wane because you have a new priority. Additionally, out of fear of what might happen to your child if you don't do what you feel you need to do, you begin to take less care of yourself than you should. You become so attached that you no longer know the line that separates caregiving from codependency. These are further signs that indicate you're a codependent mother. Remember to circle yes or no so you can easily track your answers. You find yourself fighting to control your child's behavior. Yes or no. You try to rescue your child from painful emotional experiences. Yes or no. You excessively feel the need to create a perfect world for your child. Yes or no. You sacrifice your romantic relationship with your partner to focus on your child. Yes or no. Your self-esteem is tied to your relationship with your child and their feelings, behavior, well-being, etc. Yes or no. You have a difficult time enforcing boundaries because you're afraid your child will become hostile towards you.